All right. First thing that I have to ask microbes people, I'm going to walk closer to you so I can actually see you, is do you have any questions or things you kind of want to know more about that I can maybe guide you in when it came to the cell structure? So the stuff that you did cells on, that you learned about cells. So the last week or two worth of stuff. Anything about cells you want me to focus on? No. Otherwise, I just give you guys a crash course in it. Okay. All right. So for this assessment, I want to start off. All right. Here we go. So I want to start off by explaining why I wanted you guys to look at all the different cell types. This is Need for Speed. I don't want, where's the, oh, this is my year 9 class. Duh. That makes more sense. I was like, there's so much more stuff here. All right. So, things I want you to kind of keep in mind about why I gave you all 3 different types of cells. When it comes to this assessment, we are looking at you don't need to listen to me, Asma. You work on your earth stuff. What was I going to say? Now I lost my train of thought. Okay. When you guys are doing this microorganisms assessment, what we're going to be focusing on are one of 3 possible microorganisms. I don't know if it's one, actually. I have to check the assessment criteria. You are going to be focusing on microorganisms. There are 3 different types of microorganisms that we need to think about. The first one is bacteria, which you guys have seen the structure for. The second one is going to be fungus, and I don't think a lot of you guys will do a fungus-based pathogen just because there's usually not that many that infect humans because our immune system is very good at identifying them. So we don't tend to get infected by fungus. We do get infected by bacteria, and we do get infected by viruses. So those are 3 pathogens that we are thinking about. Bacteria, fungi, viruses. You guys won't be looking at plant cells because there's not a plant-based pathogen. You might be looking at animal cells, but I think fungus are classified as animal. But the main reason why I wanted you guys to know about them is so that way you can understand more of what the bacteria is capable of doing in comparison to what the complex cells are like. It also gives you context to human cells as well. So our cells are going to be eukaryotic cells, and what we can understand then is why do the bacteria want to infect our body. So even though you're not writing a report on plant cells or plant-based things, you're not writing a report on like human-based or animal-based cells, it's still useful context because then you understand the bigger picture of what's going on. So that's why we did that. So, sorry, are you still plugged in? Okay. So let's just kind of look at the cell structure and kind of think about the differences between them. I won't go through all of them, and I won't go through labeling them. I just want us to kind of have a look. And I'm just going to open them in new tabs. Hopefully they will open. I just want us to have a look at the different things. So we will just look at plant and animal cells first, just to kind of understand what we mean by comparison, and then we'll look at prokaryotic, which is most likely what you're going to be dealing with. So these are my plant cells here. Plant cells and animal cells, when you look at the 2 of them together, are very, very similar. And that's because they're both classified as eukaryotic cells. That was the word I was looking for earlier, eukaryotic. They're both classified as eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are very complex. What makes eukaryotic cells more specialized than prokaryotic are the things called organelles, which was all these boxes over here that you were filling in. Are we okay with that so far? All right. These various organelles each have a role involved in the cell. The way I like to think about it is like the cell itself is like its own mini organism. Well, it is an organism, but okay. How do I backtrack? You know how humans have an organ system, and we have all these different organs that play vital roles in keeping us functioning as human beings and alive? Yeah, like the heart keeps the blood circulating, my stomach digests the food, my intestines absorb the food. So every single organ in the body has a job to do. That is the same thing with the cell. All these different organelles, you see where the word comes from, has a specific role in our body to do something, or in that cell to do something. I'll highlight some key ones that I think are really kind of important to know. I might actually talk a little bit about proteins today as well, just kind of give you guys context to stuff. So plant and animal cells are very similar. The key differences with some plant cells is they have the large vacuole. This is where they can store water, and this is where they can store sugars and other sort of resources and things. So something to keep in mind is that because the plant cell has chloroplast and they can make their own food, aka sugar, from sunlight, they need a place to store it. So that's why it's going to the vacuole there. Feel free to stop me at any point when I'm talking if you have a question or something interests you. We can go down that rabbit hole. So that's what we're kind of thinking about with that plant cell. If you ever notice how like your plants kind of droop if they haven't been watered, and then the moment you water them, they're fine again, it's because you've refilled the water and they have absorbed that water to store in the vacuole, and now the plant cell can be rigid, which I think is pretty cool. The other thing is, even though the plant cell droops, it doesn't completely collapse and fall apart because it has those rigid cell wall to hold its shape. So it just kind of gets soft, but it doesn't like completely on you. So that's kind of something that's unique with the plant cells. Just good to know. The animal cells and the plant cells have some really unique features that are very useful to it. Nucleus is really important because we have a lot of genetic material. The genetic material is the code to life. It basically is like a computer program that tells the cells how to function. Prokaryotic cells also have DNA, but they don't have as much. So that's going to limit what bacteria can do. On the flip side, it means that bacteria can replicate very, very quickly. We can't replicate that quickly. So that's kind of the pros and cons about it. When we talk about DNA to protein, let me see if I can find you guys an image on that. Just so you guys can think of it. There we go. All right. So this DNA is important to us, and this happens in both the bacteria and in the eukaryotic cells, is our body takes this DNA, it makes a copy of that DNA, and it only makes a single strand of it. This is double-stranded, it's single-stranded. This acts as, it's actually called mRNA, which is messenger RNA. It then sends messages throughout the cell to tell it how to make stuff. This set of instructions then tell the cell how to make these things called proteins. Proteins are really, really neat because they have a set kind of 3D structure, and because of that set 3D structure, things can then happen and they fit perfectly like a lock and key. So let me show you kind of like a protein function. Let's see if I can show you guys something that looks like it. Just trying to find one that's a good image. That one would be a good image, hopefully. All right. So you can see here that there's lots of different types of protein, and those specific shapes that they have allow it to do its function. So for example, one of the things I talked about before was hemoglobin, which is in our red blood cells, and hemoglobin is made up of ferrinin. So this is actually a part, actually, is it the same? No, I might be wrong. Backtrack. Hemoglobin is a specific shape. Because of hemoglobin's specific shape, it is able to carry around oxygen. So it binds to the oxygen, and the oxygen transports around our body. So it needs to be that shape in order to do that. Other things is like enzymes. So they have a specific shape, and then they can take part in chemical reactions and make the chemical reactions go faster. Things like insulin and, insulin is a hormone. So it's able to then send messages to other parts of the body. Again, things are fitting in like a lock and key. So this hormone, insulin, floats around our body, and our cells have these receptors where insulin binds to it. When it binds to that protein, it then sends another message inside the cell to tell it to do something. Say, for example, absorb sugar or release sugar. So that's why we have to release insulin when we're eating, so that way our body knows to absorb the sugar that's in our blood into the cells, so that way it has energy. So all really important messages. This antibody protein is going to become really important for the topic that we are doing, because that is the immune system. And one of the things we need to learn about in order to understand pathogens is the immune system. So that's cool stuff. All right. So the way that this DNA, so DNA is stored here, DNA is really, really long, very jumbled mess. We only want to send a section of that message out, so that's why we have mRNA, and that goes out into the cell. You have the rough endoplasmic reticulum, also known as the ER, and that has the ribosomes there. The ribosomes are what change this message into this. And this is just kind of the abridged version of the different bits and pieces. Are we okay with that so far? Yep, pretty cool stuff. Really complicated, which is really cool. This is why this is my favorite part of biology when I was your age. I just thought it was amazing to think about this little world inside. All right, so those are some things to think about when you're looking at that. So going now on to bacteria. Bacteria, when you went to go label it, had a lot less stuff. So it's going to limit what the cells can produce and do. This is also the reason why prokaryotic cells are unicellular organisms. So you don't ever see prokaryotic cells becoming multicellular like us. They're just individual cells functioning on their own. And that's because they don't have the tools to be more complicated. They have their own kind of chromosomal DNA. It's a lot less, and because it's a lot less, it does not need to be stored inside a nucleus. They also do have ribosomes, and they need those ribosomes because they also need to translate that message as well. So they need to make proteins. Something that's unique to bacteria is they have these things called plasmids. So we'll do a lesson on sexual and asexual reproduction. One of the reasons why bacteria cells can replicate so much faster is because they are using asexual reproduction and just making exact copies of themselves. So since they're making an exact copy of themselves, they don't have the same genetic variety as eukaryotic cells, because eukaryotic cells, they often are multicellular. They have male and female, and they have offspring that are then a combination of the two genetic material. So in order for bacteria to then have good variation, or some variation, I shouldn't say good because it's not very good, is they have these things called plasmids. And what you can do between bacteria is exchange those plasmids. So that's how they're exchanging genetic information and getting some new skill sets. Cool. I think that's all I really want to say at that point for you guys. That kind of gives you the main things that you were hopefully going to take away from your learning. So you may not have necessarily picked that up from your reading or from your research online, but because you've done prior knowledge learning, the stuff that I've told you hopefully is a lot easier for you to learn because you know so many terminologies that I'm talking about now. Cool? Questions? Not at this point? Okay. Cool. All right, you guys then can work on those SciPad pages. Think about abiotic, and biotic factors.